Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the School on Wheels Lunch Hour Workshop, Tutor Solutions, Advice and Tips to Suit Your Students' Needs. My name is Natasha Baez, and I'm the Education and Training Coordinator for School on Wheels. I'm really excited to have with me today Allison Maldonado, our Skid Row Learning Center instructor at School on Wheels. Allison will be answering questions submitted from some of our tutors, as well as any questions that you have during the hour. We really encourage you to participate and ask anything that comes into your mind. For the purpose of sound quality, all participants are currently muted, but you have the ability to ask questions at any time using the questions pane shown at the side, shown here. So just type in your question and hit send, and we'll select the order of the questions and read them aloud, and if we need any further clarification, we'll go ahead and ask you. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Allison and have her tell a little bit more about her background. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Maldonado. If you've been around the center, you know me as Miss Allison. Just to give you a little background on myself, before starting with School on Wheels, I was fortunate enough to work as a special ed teacher for 5 years. In doing that, I worked with students all sorts of backgrounds, from autistic to emotional disturbance, learning disabilities, speech impairments, hearing impairments, you name it, I've dealt with it. So I've had a great extensive background in working with students. In my working as a teacher, I began a community service project for School on Wheels, donating backpacks and school supplies, and just loved the program and what they were doing, and came to work with School on Wheels at the Skid Row Learning Center, and I absolutely love it. Been here for about a year now, and within this year I've observed a lot of things within watching tutors and students work together. One of the bonuses of being at the Learning Center is I'm able to see different students, different tutors, all ages, all ranges, all learning styles working together under the same roof, and that's where I'm able to help you guys out today. Couple things I've observed while at the Learning Center with tutors that I just want to share with you guys is one thing I've noticed is please correct students' work. I've noticed a lot of tutors, or some tutors, might not feel comfortable correcting a student's work, might not feel comfortable telling a student they're wrong or that they need to do something again. Please know that when you're working with a student, you are there to help them, guide them, and help them understand what they need to work on with or without you. So being able to correct them when you're around is the best thing possible. When working with students, a lot of things we found is it can get kind of difficult when you're talking to a student or just trying to get to know them on a personal level, or even to bond to get them to open up to you. Avoid narrow questions. Try open-ended questions. I noticed a lot of tutors might come in and say to a student, so do you have a sister? And the kid says yes. And that's the end of it. Try questions like, tell me about a member of your family. And if they say, I have a sister, great. Tell me a story about your sister. This way you're engaging them, you're opening them up, and this is a strategy you can use throughout your tutoring sessions so that it opens up your discussions in language arts or in math into something broader than yes, no, sometimes, maybe, because we all know those are the kids' go-to answers. So please, that's a great strategy. Try doing open-ended questions and getting the students to open up to you a little bit more. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to one of our questions that we received. I'll read the question out loud. It was, how do you encourage a student to not give up when they are frustrated with having to start over again after just starting over repeatedly at new schools? I love this question because I know that a lot of people probably deal with this issue when dealing with this population. One thing that I want to go back to is something that was said to everyone during the trainings for tutors, and that is a reminder that education is one of the very few things that cannot be taken away from these students. And that is something we should definitely remind our students of. Yes, they might be traveling from school to school. Yes, they might be moving from shelter to shelter, but their brain stays with them. What they've learned stays with them. What you're giving them is going to stay with them. So their setting, their environment, their scenery might change, but what's happening in their mind and in their hearts and within them is not. And that is something you definitely want to remind them, is to keep in mind that what they have been given to utilize and to hold on to. So that's definitely a big motivating tool that you can use to remind them. And this question was asked from a tutor with a ninth grade student. And that really comes in handy at this age because they're starting to notice things and starting to realize when they grow up they're going to have to start taking care of themselves and reminding them that they still have their education. Whether they go on after high school or not, they will always have that education that was given to them. One thing you can also do as well is with that student, research some success stories on celebrities that they might have, maybe celebrities that they love or respect, superheroes, even political figures, anybody that you can think of that might have come from a difficult background and have been able to prevail above that. One thing that you could do with that is instead of just focusing on their biography, focus on the timeline of their life. This really gives a student a perspective of that even though they're changing from school to school, years might pass and their education's still going to stay there. And they can compare that to the success stories of a celebrity. So say, for example, let's say Oprah Winfrey. Growing up, she was poor. She lived in a home without running water, without running food. And look at how long it took her to finally get a talk show and to get on TV. And if you're working with a student and you focus on the timeline and let them know that, yes, you might be going to 3 different schools this year, but look at how much it's going to help you in the long run to keep this education from all these different experiences and to take that with them wherever they go. Visual timelines like that really help a student understand that the short term is not going to affect them as much if they don't allow it in the future. So those are definitely some motivating tips you can use with students. Just remind them about that.
We had a question come in. It says, do you want to...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, if I can interrupt.
Go for it.
So how do I deal with a mildly autistic 4th grader working at a 1st grade level? I feel unequipped for this.
Working with autistic students can get very discouraging, and that actually works perfectly because my next question, what are some techniques to deal with special ed children? So this really coincides, and I'm actually grateful you asked that question. The number one thing that I constantly had to remind myself in the 5 years of teaching special education, repetition and reinforcement. They need repetition reinforcement. You might get super frustrated or bored doing the A long vowel sound for 6 hours, but that student needs that. Repetition, repetition. The more that it is ingrained in them, the more that they will be able to repeat it. Since autistic students are very literal and very concrete, abstract assignments for them tend to be very difficult, such as when you're doing language arts. And one question might be, what year did the story take place? Great, easy, something they can look up, something very tangible they can figure out. Something such as, how did the character feel during this event? Might be something a little more struggling for them. So what you would do is adapt the question to be concrete for, or literal for the autistic student. So instead of, how did the character feel? Let's look for words in the story that are about emotion. So you're looking for something very concrete. Remembering that abstract thoughts to the student can get confusing. I know my biggest lesson with autistic kids was on my first day I said to a student, you know, let's take a step back and look at this problem again. And the student stood up and took a step back and repeated his sentence right where he was before. And that was a big lesson to me to remember to stay literal, remember your audience, and to accommodate that. When and in terms of the reinforcement part, when I say reinforcement, it doesn't always have to be something like a sticker, something like a high five. Reinforcing it is just constantly reminding them of what they've learned in the past and reminding them of that. So something could be, if your student just learned the A vowel sound, the next week you give them 2 words, one word might have that other sound. So there is repetition in there and you're reinforcing the lesson, but it's hidden. It's not so obvious, like, we're going to do the A sound today. You could say, you could give them a word in there that throws them off guard and say, wait, didn't you hear that sound before? And then that reinforces the activity. So being able to overlap in miniature ways like that really helps autistic students. Another strategy you could use, you could pull up the board game image. This is an image we used a lot with special needs students, and this actually works for any students with special needs, behavior, ADHD. These are behavior board games. And what these are 2 examples that we found in literally 30 seconds, typing in Google printable board games. These images popped up. And what you could do, for example, on the snake one, on the snake picture, you could sit down with the student and say, okay, we got 30 minutes together. Let's break down this snake into 5-minute intervals, and each square would be an interval. You would then write on the top of the paper what the student's goal is. So if I can move 6 squares, then I get 10 minutes of tic-tac-toe time at the end of the day. These visual cues really help a student, especially with special needs, stay on track and stay focused. The board next to it with the multiple squares works really well for students that need constant reinforcement. So this could be something you do each square per math problem, each square per paragraph, and the student can make the progress. The fun part about these is they can be adapted in any way. I had a student who we gave the square project to. It was very similar to this, but it looked like a racetrack, and the student got to draw trees and flowers along the racetrack as we went along. So once again, adapt to what the student needs and really make it personalized for them. Excuse me. You can name it together. You can make sure that this becomes something between the 2 of you. Name your board game. Don't just call it printable board games, behavior board games. Call it something like Sasha's Squares to Success, so that you can be able to have the student feel accountable for it. Getting them involved brings on an emotional attachment for them, especially with autistic students. They tend to lack emotional attachment to items, and when they do, it can become an obsessive attachment, such as you see students who become really attached to a TV show or a cartoon character. Have this become that for them. Get them really addicted to making these squares a success for them and making this board game something successful for them. And with autistic and ADHD students, routine and repetition and reinforcement. Those are the 3 words that you got to keep in mind the most. So hopefully those board games will come in handy for you guys. Moving on to the next question that we received, and that would be, let me read it out loud. It is, how do I accommodate learning style except to correct a student and give the answers? I think he's reading above the lines instead of directly in front of him for information. This happens a lot that I see at the Learning Center. Students will just guess or just kind of sit there waiting for you to give them the answer. One thing that I like to remind the student when they always want me to give them the answers is I'll ask them, do you want me to sit next to you for the rest of your life? And they always look at me kind of confused, and I always say, okay, when you get a job, do you want me there? When you go on a date, do you want me there? I guarantee you they will say no, and that is when you can say, okay, then you can't let me always give you the answers. You need to figure it out for yourself, because I'm not always going to be there. So that really puts it into perspective for them, because they don't want an adult sitting with them on a date. They don't want an adult going with them to hang out with their friends. So that's a good visual stimulation for them to understand. A couple strategies you can utilize. In terms of language arts, one thing that we do for students that tend to just guess and read between the lines, we call them post-it summaries. What that is you get a post-it or an index card, and after every, depending on your student, you could do after every page, every 3 to 4 paragraphs, write bullet points, write down 2 to 3 things that you just read about and that just happened. This way the information is directly in front of them. This way you can point out to them, look, you wrote down the answer. This is what you need. Make it something directly in front of them. Another thing you could do is give them multiple answers and have them prove which one is correct. Just for an example that we do here at the Learning Center, I'll ask a student a question. Oh, excuse me. Say it could be something in regards to, let me think something, say if we're talking about animals. I could say, okay, tell me which animal is a carnivore. and I might name 4 animals, 3 of them herbivores, 1 of them I know a carnivore, and what you would do is you would reward the student for getting the answer correct the first time. That is definitely something you want to keep in mind with students who are just guessing and not looking directly in front of them. Give them multiple answers and give them rewards for, or reinforcement and praise for the moments that they get the answer right the first time. This way they're understanding that you can guess all you want. It's not going to do you any good. You can also utilize multiple choice point system. We will give points to the amount of guesses you take. So if you give them choice A, B, and C, if they get it correct on guess A, they might get 2 points. If they get it, guess number 1, not guess A, guess number 1, they might get 2 points. If they get it correct on their second attempt, then they'll get 1 point. If then they're left with one obvious answer, then there's no points. This way it encourages the student to strive to get the correct answer the first time and to get the highest amount of points possible. Ooh, excuse me.
Someone was asking with a goal at the end, they make it all the way. Is it? Oh, I'm sorry. That was
in regards to the board game.
Board game, yeah.
Oh, in regards to the board game, the question was with the goal at the end if they make it all the way. That could be based on what your session could be between your student and you. If you want to make it so that by the end, if they reach the tail of the snake in that one session, then they can get a reward or a prize. If, say, in a month session that they can reach the middle of the snake 3 times, you can adapt it as you go along based on your student needs. And that's what makes this this activity so great is you can decide this with your student. You can ask the student, all right, do you want to work on the snake just today? Or do you want the snake to be a month long? And that's when you guys can decide together. The fun part about that is encourage the month long because that encourages them to come to every session for the month because then they got to earn it by even coming to the sessions. So then that benefits you in the long run as well. So once again, please feel free to adapt this any way you see fit with you and your student. Okay, in regards to learning style, actually one more suggestion for the reading between the lines. In reading this question, I myself wasn't sure if I was reading between the lines or taking it literal. So I have a strategy that you can help a student in terms of staying focused on one section of the assignment at a time, one line in the reading on a time, one math problem on a worksheet. So anybody who may have asked a question about ADHD, this works really well. So in order to describe this, we have a little visual here. One thing that you could do is you take 2 pieces of paper. You're going to cut the paper into L shapes so that each shape has 90-degree angles on all corners. One's going to be in the shape of an L and the other one's going to be turned to look like a 7. What you could do is you put this paper on top of a worksheet. You then slide the L and the 7 together or away in any direction you need. So as you can see on the diagram, if you were doing a math worksheet, you could slide the L and the 7 together and you've blocked out the whole worksheet except for the square in the middle with the math problem. If you slide them horizontally away from each other, you've then made a long line so that it only focuses on one line in the text to make sure that your student's staying focused and to make sure that they're keeping on track. The good thing about this strategy is you could stick the Post-it on the bottom L and slide it with the work and the story so that you could take notes after every 4 lines, every 3 lines, every 4 or 5 slides we'll say to the student. And the great part about this is you can even do 1 line, you could do a whole paragraph. So this could be adapted in any way you see fit. One thing I would suggest is make them blank white pieces of paper. If you have any type of decoration on it, it can distract the student. Feel free to let them decorate one side of it so that it feels like it's theirs, it's real personal, but one side should be blank so that you are ensuring that you're covering the worksheet and only showing that 1 or 2 problem. And if you need any help with that, I know it can get kind of confusing for a visual learner. I know myself, if being described like that, please feel free to contact me and I'll help you out with that as well. Okay. The next question I had was in regards to ADHD specifically. It says, I would like to know how to handle a student with ADHD, how to incorporate learning activities to keep her focused for longer than 5 minutes at a time. This is a great question because that's definitely something you want to do, incorporate multiple learning activities. So that's definitely step one. One thing I want to give you an advice, not a learning activity, but kind of a physical strategy. I know that in the training we emphasize stress balls. If the student is really fidgety and maybe has a hard time even standing or sitting, there's two things that you could do. One, and it might seem a little silly, but if you have a yoga ball, you can actually bring that so that the student can sit on it. It keeps them moving. It keeps them feeling like they're getting some motion going, but it keeps them at the table as well. It keeps their upper body focused while their lower body still gets that stimulation. In connection with that, another thing you could do is get a long rubber band or a long piece of fabric or a long something that is a little flexible. Wrap it around the legs of the chair at the bottom. So if it's a 4-leg chair, you'll wrap it around the first two, and this way the student can then put their feet in between it, put their feet around it. Since it's kind of rubber bandy, they're able to move it around, and it keeps their lower half of their body stimulated so that you can keep their mind focused on the worksheet. So that's definitely something you could do because students might want to get up and run around. Great. Keep their legs busy for them. Keep them busy down there. I'll even let students put a soccer ball under the table, and they put their feet on it, and they're rolling around all the time. Sit them against a wall so they can kick it to the wall and back. It might be a slight distraction to you, but please understand that that might be helping the student stay focused. If you are lucky enough to have space in the room to work with, utilize it for ADHD. Turn any activity you can into a physical activity. Some suggestions for language arts. If you're doing anything with verbs, have them act it out. Have them explain to them. Even if you're not doing a verb story, have them act out their summary of the story for you. Have them act out the emotions that the character might be feeling. Tell them to get silly with it. If a character might have talked about somebody slipping, make them show you a silly way to slip and fall on the floor. If the story is about making funny faces, have them show you the silliest face they could make. Use your surroundings. So if you have the space, use it. If there's items in the room, utilize them for language arts as well. Something that we'll do is similar vowel sounds. So if a student is learning spelling words, I'll ask them for what the vowel sound is in the word, and then have them find something in the room with a matching vowel sound. It gets them up, it gets them moving, and it gets them understanding sounds in different words and understanding the phonics all around. This also works for math. One thing that we do in math is there's two strategies you can use. One is touch math, where you tap the table to count for the amount of times that you're using. You can even write down the number 3 and tap the 3 different corners as the method. Write down the number 4 and tap the corners of the number 4. I have a student who is very much so ADHD, and the tapping just wasn't enough, so we allowed clapping and air punching. So he would actually get to air punch every time he had to add. And when he would subtract, he'd have to kick. If he was multiplying, he'd have to do different things, so it adapted for the different math. I guaranteed you after about 10-15 minutes he would be out of breath, and the rest of the session he would sit and get the work done, only because at that point he was tired and he now understood it. It was less frustrating, and he was able to sit down and focus easier. Another thing you could do instead of the kicking and the punching, clapping fingers, snapping fingers, whistling, clicking of a pen, anything you can think of that'll keep the student moving really helps. And if the question specifically said how to incorporate learning activities to keep her focused for longer than 5 minutes, to be honest, if your student's only focusing for 5 minutes, only work for 5-minute intervals. Do a 5-minute interval of work, and maybe on the side have a tic-tac-toe game, so that after every 5 minutes, if they work and stayed focused, they get to move. We get to do another round. If on the side you might have a game of hangman. After every 5 minutes, if the student stayed focused, they get to pick another letter. Or you get to pick one so that they're in charge of the hangman. You're in charge of the activity, they're in charge of hangman. So if you're only getting 5 minutes of work out of them, utilize it. Take that 5 minutes and then move on to something fun. Refocus on that. But the something fun, make it quick.
We had a question that relates to that. It says, how do you take control when the student sometimes does not want to do a portion of her homework, I guess any portion, and sometimes throws a tantrum?
Yeah, tantrums are fun. If a student throws a tantrum, there's a couple things you could deal with. I worked with emotionally disturbed students, and when you say emotionally disturbed, it's students who have a hard time dealing with emotion that is appropriate for their age level. So I'm not sure exactly what age level the student is, but if a student throws a tantrum, it's their way of showing two things, either frustration or attention. They might need attention from you in any way possible, positive or negative. So that could be like, please beg me to behave, or please tell me that I could do better, please do this for me, please do something. So that is one thing that students use it for, is that attention. Another thing is frustration level. It could be that they just don't get the assignment and they're so embarrassed, they don't know how to tell you, or they just don't realize that they are frustrated. So some strategies that you could do.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just, what are some strategies?
Okay, so some things that you could do would just be to...
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Give me 1 second, guys.
I don't think I can pull it back up, but it was just basically how do you take control? How do you regain control of that session?
So if the student is throwing that tantrum, one thing that you could do is, if they are looking for attention, ignore it. Just ignore it. I will seriously have a student throwing a tantrum. Could be on the floor, could be just completely shut down. I'll pull out my phone and I'll get on it. I'll start playing a video game. Eventually the student will look at me and be like, what are you playing? I'll be like, hey, do you see what I'm playing? Have you played this before? You've now completely distracted them. They've done with the tantrum, and now you could say, well, let's get this worksheet done, and then you could play this game. This way we're not dwelling on the actual tantrum. We're not bringing it up. So that's one strategy you could do for students that shut down. Another thing you could do to help with the frustration level is hide the worksheet and bring out something that you know that they can do. This way you can bring up the confidence level and it avoids that feeling of frustration. It also helps to let the student remind them, especially for autistic or emotionally disturbed children, to remind them of the positives in their life, because part of the reason they might be having these tantrums or emotional issues is something from their past that's coming up that you might never know about, or the student might never understand themselves, and that's been a defense mechanism prior. In order to teach them that this defense mechanism isn't going to work again in the future, is to show them, you know, this behavior, you're not going to get what you want. I'm not going to give it the attention that it's craving. I will give you the attention when I'm seeing positive behavior, such as asking questions, such as answering questions. Even if you ask them, do you want a 5-minute break? They might not say yes, but if they shake their head a little bit to say yes, acknowledge that. Say, thank you for answering me. I'll give you that 5 minutes to calm down. At the end of the 5 minutes, I might even just look at the student and give them a thumbs up. If they thumbs up me back, great. I'll say something, ask them a question like, okay, are you ready now, or do you need another 2 minutes? Don't give them another 5 minutes, because then they'll just keep taking that 5. But you're getting verbal confirmation from them, visual confirmation from them, that you're giving for the positive behaviors. So to deal with the frustration, once again, have them teach you something, bring on activities you know that they're going to excel at, that they're going to succeed at. If it's a shutdown, don't feed into the negative behaviors, only reinforce the positives. So hopefully that helps out. Let's see. I think I was done speaking about the ADHD learning activities for the 5 minutes at a time. Just to reiterate, yes, if they're only working for 5 minutes, go ahead, take advantage of that. On top of that, if you are only working for 5 minutes at a time, make sure that you are allowing or emphasizing the correct answer the first time for the student so that they're not wasting that 5 minutes just guessing and guessing just to get to the end of that 5 minutes. Give them rewards for getting it right the first time, even the second time. Give that encouragement to get it right away so that they want to continue to do that for you as well. Okay.
We have a math question. I'm not sure if you want to
no,
answer
go
that
for it.
here or okay. We also do have a math workshop that's recorded on our workshops page, but we can answer this one. What is a good method to teach carryover in addition and subtraction?
Carryover. There's actually, I wish I had it memorized, but there's a great poem for subtraction that we have on the wall here that I would be really happy to post to you guys later. It's a fun little story that we tell the kids, and it keeps them remembering when to carry. Another method you could do is graphing paper. So being able to have a piece of paper with lines so the student can see the exact placement of each number so that they could see where the tens column is, where the ones column is, and then say, for example, if they're adding 99 plus 11, then you could see the 9 on top of the 1 in the ones place, and then they'll understand 9 plus 1 is 10. Okay, the 1 that's in the tens place now stays in the tens column, so that's going to go on top of the other 9. So having that graphing paper there for them to see the lines to distinguish the placement and the place value really helps a lot. Another thing that you could do is visuals. So one thing we do for students with addition and subtraction is we will grab a handful of crayons or a handful of pencils, even pieces of paper ripped into little strips, and put them into groups of 5 or 10, and then having them be visual manipulatives for the numbers. So on that graph paper on top of the number 9, having 9 pieces of paper, and then having the students move those pieces of paper to the different rows really gives them a visual account of where the numbers are going and where the place values are going, to help them carry over on that. And I'm going to write down to get that subtraction poem because it's really cute actually. Okay, I hope that helped. And just one thing I wanted to bring up real quick in talking about observations at the Learning Center. During our summer program, we're going to be doing a very interactive program to connect with the open-ended questions I mentioned earlier in order to get that discussion going with your student and to get that connection happening. Our summer program is going to be releasing weekly questions in order to engage you and your student in different sessions. Yesterday at the Learning Center, I had 3 students, all male high schoolers in 9th and 10th grade, sit down at a table, and I asked them, how do our eyes know when to cry when they are sad? And all 3 of them looked at me like I just asked them to name every movie ever made in existence. So it was quite interesting to see the thought process happening. And one thing that I did was play devil's advocate. You know, that's definitely something you guys could utilize in your tutoring session, is ask them questions. I had a student tell me, well, your brain tells your eyes to cry. And I said, okay, well, where's the water coming from in your eyes? How does your brain know that you're sad? Why do I cry when I'm happy then? How does my brain know that I'm smiling right now, but I shouldn't be crying? But if somebody walks in with $1 million check, I'm going to be so happy I should cry. How does my brain know the difference? Once again, they all looked at me like I spoke Egyptian in hieroglyphics, and it got the discussion going. The students then began talking about signals in your brain. One student said the gas in your brain. Another student said, no, you don't have gas in there, it's chemicals. One said, oh yeah, the chemical is called serotonin. No, they're called serotonin. So that turned into a huge discussion. And in the end, an hour later, we had 3 male high school student boys, one with a scientific method with his hypothesis, his thesis, and what he researched. One was a visual diagram and chart labeled with, like I learned yesterday from him, the lacrimal gland connected to the tear ducts. And he had the chart written out, including the brain mapping. And another student had written a paragraph on his opinion on why he thought his brain knew when he should cry, why his brain cried at these moments and not these. And it was amazing to see these 3 high school boys debate crying. And it was great. So that's one thing I really want to encourage you guys to use. Once again, I utilized open-ended questions. I let them guide the discussion. We adapted the lesson as we went along. If it had started talking about emotions and they had kind of started bringing up male versus female roles in terms of who should be crying and when is appropriate to cry. And, you know, that's something that could be utilized too, but in the group setting we were in, we kept it focused on the actual question at hand. Another thing you could do for summer strategies to help keep your student focused, there's the apps to fill in the gaps, and we've been using them in the Learning Center a lot lately. And one thing that we've been using is the definite apps that you'll find on the website, but we've also been utilizing apps you might already have on your phone just for you to play. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Subway Surfers or Temple Run, Candy Crush, all of those games. We have those on our tablets here, and we let the students play them academically. Just to give you an example of what we do to help keep the students motivated with those games is use the point system. For example, Subway Surfers or Candy Crush. At the end of every round, you get a score. We'll have the students write down their score. The younger ones, they're learning place value, so I'll say what number's in the tens place, what number's in the hundreds place, and that's all they're doing. And they get to have their fun, they get to answer the question. The older students, I play around, they play around. We write down the scores. I'll ask them, what's the sum of our scores? What's the difference between our scores? I'll ask them, what'll happen if I get this score 5 more times? What'll be my total score? And if they get it right, they get to go next round. If they argue their way through it, if they're guessing, they don't get the next round. It's as simple as that. And it's your phone, so it's something, or on a tablet you might have, so it's something that you can definitely utilize with the student. So use what you have to keep summer exciting. But don't let it get too crazy. Thanks to the kids, I'm on level 42 on my phone of Subway Surfers. So thanks to playing with the kids, I am now a big fan. But once again, it keeps them focused. They're learning their numbers, they're learning their math, and it's keeping them happy, and it's making the best out of the sessions. Okay. So once again, if you have any questions over the summer program, please visit our website and check it out, or ask your coordinator as well. Okay, another question that we had, we received, it says, my student is not reading, he is faking it. He has a hearing problem and is just about to get hearing aids. Sounding out words just isn't working yet. In order to directly address the hearing problem situation, one thing that you can utilize, look it up online, is a program called Whisper Phones. Whisper Phones are a method that you can use with your student. It's exactly what it is. It's a little hollow telephone that goes from the student's ear to the student's mouth, and what they could do is they speak into the whisper, the bottom portion, and they hear directly into their ear what they are saying. It is the best way to teach a student phonics because they are hearing their own voice, their own sound directly into their ear. There's no distractions. There's nothing that might be blocking the sound. It goes straight from mouth to ear for the student. It definitely will help students with hearing problems. One strategy you could use is just going to Home Depot and getting PVC piping that has a slight curve in it. Works great. With my nephews, we use a toilet paper roll. I'll put it, they talk into it, and I'll have it in my ear, or I'll talk into it and they have it to their ear so that they could hear the proper spelling, the proper pronunciation of a word that they might be having difficulty with. So if the student has not received their hearing aid yet, or the student might not feel confident with it even after they receive it, these are different definite strategies you could utilize to help out with the sounding out issue. Another thing that you could do is, since they're having problems with one of their senses, utilize the other one. So whisper phones can help with the sense of sight. One of the senses of vision you could use is called puzzle letters or puzzle words. What you do is you take a word and you give the student a index card, and they get to write the word as neatly as possible on the index card and decorate it. What you then do is you cut out the letters individually of the index card for the student's various spelling words. And then what you could do is then the student takes those pieces of the puzzle and puts the words together. They are sounding it out letter by letter with the puzzle. It's kind of like the strategy on the old school Sesame Street where you have the shadow of one face looking at the shadow of the other face, and it's saying like at, cat. Well, it's just like that, but now it's visual and in front of you with the cards, so the student's playing a puzzle game. So you could take the letters and say, okay, I have a T for t. It makes this sound. Can you find the other half of my puzzle? And they can't just say, oh, I found the O-P. No, you would say you found the op. Op. So now they just found the puzzle for top. And it's great for students who have the hearing issue because now it's a visual thing that the sounds are connecting and coming together, and they could see those sounds, and they're actually making those sounds connect by putting the puzzle together. So it's a great strategy you could use. Constantly ask questions to students with hearing problems. I know that might sound a little redundant or silly that you're asking questions to somebody with a hearing problem. You're constantly do it. Constantly write down the question and point to it over and over and say and remind them what they're working on. So say, for example, you're working on spelling words. You might write down the spelling word wrong 2 times and correct 1 time. Don't have them spell it to you because they might have a problem with that. Have them point to the one that's correct. It'll build up their confidence so they're not just listening to you say the word and then they have to repeat it. This way they're visually finding the incorrect or the correct one instead of just listening, which might be discouraging for them since they already have the hearing issue. When you do have a student with some type of disability such as hearing issues, when you do find a method that works, stick with it. Stay consistent with that repetition. If they feel confident with that learning style, please be consistent with it, because if you continue to change it up, it might discourage them. If you ask them, you know, do you want to find something different? Is this getting boring for you? Do you want to try something new? Try that strategy prior so that they feel ready and prepared to move on to the next method and to learn a new method, instead of just being scared that something else might be discouraging or you're taking them out of their comfort zone. Because when you've lost one sense that others may have, you're already out of the comfort zone. So you want to make sure that you stay within that to help out the students in any way that you can. Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Just real quick. Just for some general ideas and suggestions to keep tutors involved and keep you guys focused with a student, there's some strategies that we use here at the Learning Center that I'm happy to share with you guys. There's one tip you can use during the summer. I know students don't get a lot of homework, so there's a lot of inventing and making up as you go along, and I will say, as a special education teacher, that is what I did. So I have some ideas and tricks to help you guys. There's one strategy you can use. There's something everybody loves, and that's music. Students love music. Kids love music. I know tutors love listening to music. You might have an artist or a song you have in common, or you might have complete opposite taste. Utilize that. One thing you could do is students might be really into rap, for example. Print out lyrics. Print out song lyrics for any song that they might like. Censored, preferably, to make sure that it's appropriate, and turn it into a language arts project. One trick that we did, and it is absolutely hilarious, is you take a song and you do the grammatically correct version of it. So you take a song and you turn the little sentences into, or the little blurbs into full-on sentences. So one thing you could do is Justin Bieber. Good old Justin Bieber has a song where his chorus says, baby, baby, and I was like, baby, baby, and all he said was, I was like, and I go, and he was like. And what I did is I printed out the lyrics, and I said, fix Justin Bieber. And they had to turn his small sentences into actual sentences. So the Justin Bieber song ended up saying, and I walked up to her and said, oh, baby, oh, baby. And then I approached her the next day and said, ooh. So it was hilarious hearing the kids sing this out loud, being able to be silly with it, get silly with the student and the tutor, and it was a great language arts lesson in proper sentence structure, in full sentences, run-on sentences, fragment sentences, and it works for any age range because you could pick any artist from the Wiggles to Jay-Z, so it works out great for everybody. Another thing that you could do is in lines with something that students all love instead of music is movies. During the summer, there's a lot of movie blockbusters coming out, a lot of superhero movies coming out. One thing you could do is turn the student into a critic, turn the student into a writer. I have students who really love superheroes, so I might tell them, you know what, you've just been hired to write Iron Man 4. What is it going to be about? Write me the back of your DVD box. And there you and your student have now found a topic of extreme interest to your student. It's a hidden assignment because it's not straight doing a worksheet, and it's going to be something fun for them because it's something that they're inventing. Even take it a step further and mail it off to the movie studio. You know, nothing might ever come from it, but hey, it'll be fun for them to learn, fun for them to do. They might not have ever addressed an envelope to mail something before, and now you're teaching them a lesson, something they might not have had. So hopefully that helps out as well. In order to help with math, so those are some great language arts ideas. Some great math ideas that I would love to share is functional math. With the population that we work with, they want to shop. You know, they want to spend money. They're typical teenagers. They're typical kids. They want toys. They want to buy stuff. So we want to be able to teach them how they can make these luxuries happen for them in their future. Functional math is going to do that for you. So one thing you could do is find something the students love. Maybe a student particularly enjoys Target. As I'm saying, my favorite store. Get an advertisement from there. Have the student make a wish list of X amount of items they might want. Add it up and then turn it into a math lesson. Say, okay, say you have a coupon 10% off. How much would you have to save? Say you have $35 and you owe this, or you have to save up this much. How much are you going to save up? Maybe you might want to have them pick multiple items to figure out what's the best strategy for having $100 to spend. You know, what can you get with that much money? Turn it into functional math. It works really well with even different stuff in the room. I'll walk around the room and pretend that I'm shopping, and I'll grab random shopping items such as a pencil, chapstick out of my pocket, my cell phone case, a bobby pin in my hair, you know, anything you have lying around. And I'll tell the student, how much does this cost? They have to tell me. They have to write it down, which is a lesson in math, decimal points. And then they have to add it together, which again teaches decimal points. And it's functional as well because it's vocational skills that they might need in the future if they want to get a summer job as a teenager, you know, working at Target, working here, working there. It's definitely skills that they're going to need. Talking to somebody in customer service. So that's something you could definitely utilize. Once you have those items in your basket, then you and the student can walk around putting stuff away, and now the student's turn to go shopping and walking around the room, and you're the cashier. And when I play cashier, I mess up. I will mess up, and I'll have the student correct me. So what I'll do is I'll pick up a pencil, and I'll say, okay, you're buying a pen. And I'll have them correct me. And I said, okay, well, now that you fixed it, I guess I'll give you $5 off at the end of your purchase. So then now you've added an extra element to the assignment. They got to correct you, and they just got a reward of $5 off their invisible items. So those are definitely items that you could use and strategies you could use. Oh, excuse me.
We don't have anything, any questions right now. Does anyone have any remaining questions? Allison is a great resource. She's had phenomenal
Lots
ideas.
of experience.
Yes, lots of experience.
Yes.
Doesn't look like it. Well, we've recorded this webinar so that you can watch it later if you want to go back to revisit some of those points, because they're definitely useful in your tutoring sessions. Allison also did a workshop last December as well, and so she suggested some other ideas in that one. So you might want to check that out. That's all on our webpage under the tutoring resources. It's under workshops.
Okay.
But there was one last question about, oops, I'm sorry, I just cleared that question. But I guess how to work with times tables. Maybe do you have any creative
multiplication?
ideas? Yeah.
Multiplication. Okay, a couple strategies you could use for multiplication on top of the multiplication chart, which is a good go-to, but I know that students will never carry that around with them the rest of their life. So one thing that you could utilize is it might be difficult for students to memorize every single multiplication fact. I know myself, I don't have them all memorized, so I memorize the main ones, and I use addition around it. So I might not know 6 times 7, but I know 6 times 5. And I'll know 7's 2 above 5, so I know. And it's kind of hard to describe verbally, but on paper, you could show it to the student with the different addition and subtraction. So stick with the main multiplications, the multiplying by the 2's, the multiplying by the 5's, and then utilize the ones closest to that to help the students. So start with the most common. I know most people want to start at 1, 2, and then go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Don't do that. Start with 0. The answer is always going to be 0. Start with 1. The answer is always going to be the other number. Start with 2, and then go to 2. And then skip to 5. And then skip to 10. And then skip to 11. And then do the ones in between that, because once the student has grasped those other concepts, it'll be easier for them to then fill in the gaps. Big strategy with learning the multiplications of 9. It's a great trick. If you put your hands in front of you, both finger palm up. If you're doing 9 times 7, for example, you have both hands up, all 10 fingers pointing up. You're going to put down your 7th finger, which would be the pointer next to your thumb. And then right before that, you have 6 fingers sticking up. Right after that, you still have 3 fingers sticking up. 9 times 7 is 63. So it's right there on your fingers. So just to explain it again, if you have 10, you're doing 9 times 3. You'll count 1, 2, 3. You'll put your middle finger down. You have 2 fingers up on the right side or the left side. 7 fingers up on the right side. So 9 times 3, 27. So it's a great strategy to help memorize 9s. And once again, the other ones are just going to take memorizing. Stick to what they know first. Stick to the big ones, 0, 1, 2, 5, 10, and 11, and then fill in the other ones between that. If memorizing's too hard, just memorize the main ones in between that, and the rest kind of just fill in with little addition problems and simple finger adding in between. But just remind them it is okay not to have every single multiplication memorized. I'm a 30-year-old teacher, and I don't have them all memorized. So just remind them of that. Always remind your students that they're not going to be able to memorize every single thing in the world. You know, all these strategies are going to help them in the future remember or figure out how to remember, or you know, something's going to click in them that's going to remind them of this stuff that they learned. So just remind them of those little things to keep them encouraged and keep them motivated. One more thing that you could do for students in terms of multiplication, for students that might like to count or need the visual, if you're doing a problem, I'm going to use 5 times 3, for example. You take the first number, and you'll draw something 5 times. So I'll draw 5 circles on the paper, okay? So then the student counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They put up their finger to show 1. They still have the dots on the paper, and then you'll keep counting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Once they get to the last dot, they then put up their second finger to show that they've counted 2 times. So 5 times 2, 10. Okay, we need to do 5 times 3, so we're going to do it one more time. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And then they've counted the dots, reached the end, that's the third time. So now you've just done 5 times 1, 5 times 2, and 5 times 3 on your fingers just by counting some dots on a piece of paper. It could be the dots, it could be anything. I had a student draw hearts, another one drew flowers. Don't let them get too crazy. I had a student want to draw cars, and each car took about a minute. And after a while, I was like, okay, now we're just writing the word car. So make sure that you don't let the students hustle you, and keep that in mind. But definitely utilize that strategy. So you can use the 9 trick for the fingers, the counting the dots, and the multiplication chart as well are different strategies for times tables. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we've answered a lot of questions.
Yay.
And covered a lot. We'll let Allison eat her lunch before the students come in. But thank you again, everybody in attendance, for joining us for this workshop. And we'll let you know if there's any further workshops. We don't have them on the calendar quite yet, but hopefully we'll get some more for the summer and for the rest of the year. So thank you again. And if you have any additional questions, we'd be happy to answer them at any time. Our email information is up here. Oops. There's Allison's email and my email as well, and you can always reach us through your regional coordinator as well. But Allison has a lot of experience and background that she can help you with specific situations. So thanks again, and
thank you, everybody.
I hope you have a great day. Thanks.